today we're going to start off talking about some work that I've been doing in the research environment, but we're also hoping it's equally applicable in the practitioner environment, and even we're going to start thinking about taking it to corporate sustainability offices. I just want to tell you a little bit about where I've come from, just so that you also know that I'm not actually throwing out data with this. I love data, I love maps, I love empirical work and collecting stuff and putting it there and mining the data to death. But actually over the years, Dirk and I have been working together on processes in water governance, and that's such a fluid environment that you actually do end up working a lot in participatory processes. And we've nested all this work that we've done in social processes and learning processes. And it's been really, really nice to do that. And yeah, most of my work recently has been, well, not recently anymore because I've moved, is on freshwater ecosystem conservation and also the water source areas, manipulating the data for the first time to get to that, the water source areas that we have today. So that's where I come from. And when I arrived in Netherlands 5 years ago, it's not a planned immigration, by the way. We do want to come back. When we arrived there, I was actually quite shocked at how the university is quite aside from the practice, and that's not what you see here. So this is a very nourishing environment for me to be in, to see how fluid our boundaries are sometimes in moving between practice and theory. So that's really nice for me. And I'd like to give some acknowledgement to my co-worker in this, that I've been working with her, Josie Chambers. And the work, the SANParks work that I was speaking about, the ecosystem conservation work that Dirk and I did, it was so beyond running computer algorithms and prioritizing ecosystems after its 5-year span that we decided to write it up as a co-production study instead. And I met Josie about 7 years ago talking about co-production. And 42 authors later, we wrote this paper. We wrote 2 papers actually on co-production lessons from all over the world. And this is one of them, the co-productive agility. And it really personifies researchers into 4 main roles that we play. And if we're forced into any of these roles for too long and they become dominant, we actually missing the messy middle space of practice. So that's something, and that's something really important to keep in mind. And what we were trying to show in the opinion polls is it depends on time, it depends on context, it depends on many factors, and you really need to get pro at moving and becoming agile between these spaces and moving up and down these polls that we see. So that was the co-production era. It was like kind of like mid-2015, I guess. And after co-production, and we'd sat with like really amazing people all over the world to work out lessons, we thought, well, you know, what next? And then there was this thing of transformative change. And we thought, well, you know, what is transformative change and what makes research or work transformative for society? And we thought, oh, we'll get started by unpacking the black box of transformative change and doing this lovely literature review of everybody, what people are saying, what the experts are saying on transformative change. And we came up with as many approaches that were being called transformative as the papers we read. And there was just no clarity really about it. And actually any clarity that was, or any attempt at a definition of it, was actually getting quite narrow and excluding other people's views of transformative change. And so we ended up designing a much more personal process where we actually went and interviewed 71 researchers across Wageningen. And 71 is a lot of, 71 hours of listening to people's visions on transformative change. But it was such an uplifting place because we just uncovered people that are stuck in like little siloed bubbles everywhere across the university doing unbelievably amazing work. And then some very, very, very weird things, and fears, and suppression, and poles, and polarities, and binary thinking. And that all came out, and the power of an anonymous report that's had so much interview, 71, was quite something for the institution to pick it up and say, oh, we better do something about this if these are the common fears that are coming out. So that was the 71 visions, and there were three things that really emerged. The one was that there are many tensions and polarizations across the university, and people tend to think in these polarities and binaries. You've either got to work with people or confront them. You've either got to acknowledge the past, and in South Africa some of the time it's the past atrocities, to move forward, or you've got to imagine positive futures and be much more positive. So these are the kinds of things that we were finding coming out. And I've put stars everywhere where I wanted to link things, and I knew I wouldn't remember. So, oh, it was Anina. She said, so the red stars are things I want to link from what I've heard here. Anina was saying, you know, you've got to find the sweet spot. And I think that actually is it. And we've heard a lot of these polarities today, and you've got to actually understand when is the right time to move into a more diplomatic role. When is the right time to actually stand up and confront and challenge? So those are the sorts of things, and it's again talking to this agility. The other thing that emerged was that it's not, and this is what Tally's also said, that's where a red star is, it's not really what research you're doing. You can do maps that can actually be the same thing, but how you've done it is really important, and the assumptions underneath are really important. And it's really, really important about how you do this research. And so we identified 4 ways of working that were consistently raised by people that had actually managed to transcend the barriers and become a little bit more transformative in their work. The first one is about pluralizing. I'm going to go through each of these, but it's really about opening up and navigating diverse perspectives. And I'll talk a bit about what that means just now. And the other one is empowering. So how do you mobilize people to act for collective good? What is needed to do that? And politicizing is understanding and addressing these power dynamics and relations that are going on, that are often not surfaced but hidden and pushed under. And then embedding is around sustaining iterative learning and action. And then the other thing that we heard so much about is how many barriers. So we asked people, well, if that's your vision, do you work towards that in the work you're doing? And resoundingly not. And resoundingly, there were lots of reasons given and barriers to why people weren't working like that. But for every barrier that was presented, we also found cunning researchers that had actually transcended these. And what we were thinking then is, how can we reframe leaders, researchers, or practitioners as leaders of change? What process can we design that's really individual, that really helps researchers or environmental practitioners exercise their own agency to really transform institutions and science-society relations? So there are other structural issues. The institutions have to come to the party. The funders and we've seen the Shift the Power movement have to come to the party. But we really wanted to think about researchers reframing how they see themselves in society and recognizing that they are the privileged elite. We are the privileged elite, all of us sitting here. We all can take up leadership roles because we've been educated, we have the ear of certain policymakers, and we can really think about how we can reframe in our own way and within our own agency what we can do. So that's what we did. We decided to design 2 responses. And now I've got another star that I can't remember, so I'm just going to look at what that is. Yeah, so this was very personal. Okay, so this was also not something we had thought about, designing this glossy study and this meta-analysis. And actually, where the research led after the 71 visions was to become much more personally reflexive. And I wanted to point out to Sharon's I loved that picture of somebody's head being opened and filled with knowledge. And I think we do that quite often as the way that we've taught to lecture, and really bringing this self-realization and experience, we heard that from Sam as well on day one, is really important. And that's what we were trying to design, is a series of responses that would actually get people thinking and discussing on their own, like those opinion lines that you had, and you can do much more with that. So the first response that we did was to run transformative dialogues at VER. And dialogue is very different from a lecture series, and I think that people in my natural science world were not prepared for the dialogues, because they came and then we broke them out into groups to discuss various issues and polarities, and and they were like, huh? We thought we were going to be told a definition of transformative change. How can we give you our vision if you haven't told us how to define transformative change? And so they really wanted that lecture to sit there passively, to just absorb this knowledge, which they were going to lose immediately. So what these dialogues were really around was to create these spaces where researchers can really examine and re-envision their own role by talking to people in different disciplines, which they very seldom actually do, because they're usually stuck very much in their own work. And really to empower them to make their own transformation and to lead their own change and see how they can connect their work to societal change. And then there's this quote, I didn't have to have a star because I got it onto the slide, where Sam said something on the first day about, it's not about standing up and imparting wisdom that I was learning in the steering committee, but rather letting others experience it through informal learning process, through talking to each other, through long lunches, long bus rides. So those are really important, and we created these breakout groups for that. The second response strategy was to design a transformative PhD course. And Nelsui has just been on one. We've done 2 so far. We've had about 26 to 30 students. It's been awesome for me to participate in them. I've learned so much. And also Alta's student, Putuma. No, I don't know where Alta is. Anyway, so we've had 2 South Africans from the GRIN community participate in them, and I'd really like to see more as we go, because there's so much rich learning here that Europeans just don't get to see. The dialogue, I'm going to give you some results now. I was very interested actually about the response strategies in analyzing our results. Matthew was showing these value chains. I think it's interesting to think about how we could analyze this data using these shifts. But we worked with dialogue advisors. We structured both the PhD course and the dialogue around these 4 ways of working. And we worked with an artist in the dialogues to actually distill the main things that were coming out in the dialogues. And I'll give you a flavor for it, but I'm not going through this. But if you would like the chameleon, come and ask me and I'll give you a JPEG and you can read it. So one of the overwhelming results that was coming out beyond just the four ways of working, before I go into it, was this idea of moving from a shadow researcher to a human researcher. And what I mean by that is what we found resoundingly in the 71 visions, and then again in the PhD courses, and again in the dialogues, where we had 50 to 70 people participating each time over 4 months. What we found was this idea of fear, suppressed emotions, fear, anxiety, but also like joy, compassion, love, care. So we found all of these coming in, but that's not for science. That's not the science environment. It's not scientific to show that. And we found very much that people were taking on this social norm, an expectation that a scientist is an objective person, a neutral bystander. And that was very resounding, especially with the natural scientists. And what our process was around was to design ways to open up these spaces using these 4 ways of working to become a human researcher, one that engages with your authentic self and thinks about how you can use your own feelings and emotions and creativity and bring that together as a truly human researcher. And I think one of the most beautiful narratives that last year that a PhD student wrote was Sina Bauma, and she wrote, you can see on the left, your left, there's a tree that's like kind of like the scientific geometric shaped tree, and then she was realizing over the course that she could combine this tree and these leaves and roots are becoming interwoven, and she wrote, what the course achieved is planting a seed right at the interface between two knowledge systems. This seed symbolizes the many new possibilities on how to do transformative science beyond the boundaries of natural science background that I've been in. So I think that it really fits to this idea that we feel that the natural science way we've been training people is not fit for purpose anymore. It casts researchers as innocent bystanders, really, with no role to play in societal change. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that then it becomes very cold clinical facts that are getting disseminated. And we feel that that is possibly one of the biggest things that needs to change in order to become more transformative in your work. So I'm just going to go quickly through some of the things that we found on the 4 ways of working. The first one was pluralizing, and it's really about who defines the desired change, and that's what the question was around clear goals from the outset. Is like, who is defining this change? And we heard that a number of times. Somebody said, oh, we go with our like-it scales and we ask the communities to monitor this, but we never ask them what they would like monitored, you know? So those are the kinds of things that we really need to think about, and this was captured very nicely. It was before I was associating pluralism with inclusivity, which I interpreted as getting everyone around the table, but now I realize that might sustain situations where powerful voices overrule marginalized ones. So which interests am I serving? Which interests do I actually want to serve? And which interests am I failing to serve? And you've got to really think about those assumptions before you go in. And I think that one of the things here is that actually marginalization often happens at the table. And we're seeing participatory processes are really marginalizing people and legitimizing in a false way, false legitimization. So that was one thing that we heard from Nadia actually at the day one. She said the voices of youth, they want an entirely different table. They want their voice to be heard, but not at that kind of table. So we really got to start thinking about ways that we do this. And it's not just about tidy consensus, which is the thing that I picked out of this leaf here. It's not about integrating and blending to a bland consensus. It's really about recognizing disagreements, acknowledging them there, and then making a decision either way. And then on the empowering one is what knowledge is considered legitimate. And we've heard a lot about that today. We've heard about Indigenous local knowledge. We've heard about emotion. We've heard about care. So we've heard about a lot. And really there, I love this picture of the emojis and the scholars catching them. It's about bringing emotions back into science, because this overly sterilized factual approach divorces science from passion and emotion. And we've also heard that storytelling and art and poetry, this is a way to mobilize and access diverse ways of knowing. You know, we've heard so much about that over the course of today. And really, from my point of view, what I am witnessing is that we stand up as matter-of-fact people. We rattle off our data, biodiversity is declining, the river's declined, and here's all the data to prove it, the evidence-based. And it really is just giving this cold environment that is helping decision makers, whether they're business makers, policy makers, it's just not working. They can actually take these cold facts and it was a business decision, it was with our head, not our heart. You know, let's turn it to a matter of care. Let's stop this overly sterilized world where we're actually helping people go against their innate sense of responsibility to do good for people and good for the planet. So we've heard a lot about people-nature relations today, and that's really, I feel quite about giving people the stage on that. And then the next one is about politicizing, and it's really going from these facts to this imagination, and that's what I think I said to Steph, hold this thought, because this is a very interesting pole, this power. Politicizing is speaking speaking truth to power. It's about understanding the power dynamics. And there are many ways to do this, actually, and it actually is often a personality thing, whether people want to be pragmatic, diplomatic, revolutionary, activist. You know, there's many different ways of approaching it, and you can actually be one of those fortunate individuals that can, you know, go into many different types, or you could pair with people, and you can even do it by pairing like a diplomatic person with a revolutionary person, because they actually fight the same cause. It's because the revolutionary person makes it feel impossible, and the diplomatic person can walk in and be easy on their tail. So these are things that we've got to learn. We've got to learn how to do them better and to understand and recognize that all this gradient works, but we need to work together and open our minds to working together and acknowledging that all these things are right. And acknowledging some of the problems and tensions underneath them. And then finally, the methods clinic. This is embedding. And I just want to share with you, this is about really thinking about critical disembedding. It's about, we're all embedded in structures, but maybe we should disembed in some of the structures that are actually maybe have got really bad power dynamics, co-option, people that aren't listening. This isn't about tidy consensus. You can actually exclude people, just be really upfront, explicit about it, and examine why. What's your rationale for it? And examine if that rationale is valid. And the methods clinic is one of my favorites because it was taking methods that we actually quite often use, and it was saying six valuable members of the methods community have fallen ill at a very favorite conference, and now they need to be diagnosed. And we then we got students to diagnose these methods and see what they problematize them and see what their problematics were, what they had to offer. And we had Miss Elite Interviewson, we had Miss Likert Scale, we've had that in here, surveys. We had, what were the other ones? I can't remember them all. We had, the participatory observation, opinion polls, focus group, and door-to-door interviews. And we had these methods that we gave them personas, and then students went away, and my best was, farewell opinion polls, the majority will miss you. So it's really talking about people thinking critically about the assumptions underneath their methods and whether they're narrowing some of the opportunities that they use. And this one was particularly personal for me because the year before we had given a talk about we're going to now involve stakeholders, we're going to embed in institutions, so you've got to do this stakeholder, this is the guideline, this is the thing you have to use. And we gave a kind of lecture style thing, and it just did not land, you know. So again, it's about giving over to people to experience it themselves. Okay, so this is my last slide actually. And it's a question for you guys. It's about your shadow self. And it's about you thinking about what parts of your core identity do you suppress in your own role as a researcher or as a practitioner. What is it that you think, oh, can't bring that into the room, have to leave it out there, come in as less of myself, my shadow self, I have to come in there. And then also to think about your feral self, and I'm looking at Nadia, she's always talking about ferals. Because your talk was actually about this, but it's what most creative, wild parts of your identity would you like to set free in your role here in societal change, and what do you really want to think about, like bringing in, because then you can really think about becoming your human researcher. And it's a tough one. It's tough to navigate. It's like you might be feeling things, you might be bringing emotions into the room, you have to bring tensions in and face those. How do you navigate those? And I guess that what we've got is my favorite saying, which is we've just got to get used to being comfortable about being uncomfortable, comfortable with confusion, comfortable with ambiguity. And once we start doing that, we can then surface tensions, and we can start having really deeper, meaningful conversations and maybe, hopefully, getting somewhere or igniting seeds in other people, because we're not here to impart our wisdom on other people. What we're really wanting to do is catalyze them as leaders and really like spark that seed and plant it, so that that's how you achieve scale, I think, apart from removing some power structures. I'm going to leave it there.